Hello YouTubers, today I'm going to be changing the spark plugs in my wife's 2013 Lexus GS350. Her car is equipped with a 3.5 liter V6 engine and Lexus recommends that you change the spark plugs every 60,000 miles. If your car is still under warranty, I highly recommend that you follow this service interval, otherwise Lexus could deny you a future warranty claim. Truth be told, changing the spark plugs in this car was very easy and I was able to complete the job in under an hour. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we have to do is remove the engine cover. Just give it a good tug and it'll come right off. With the engine cover removed, I'm going to first start on the driver's side. In order to gain access to the coil packs and spark plugs, we will have to move a few things out of the way, like the gray wiring harness and a few hoses. The gray wiring loom is held on by two bolts. There's a 12mm bolt on the front and a 10mm bolt on the rear. With these bolts removed, you'll be able to slide the wiring harness out of the way in order to gain access to the coil packs. Next, remove this vacuum hose that connects to the top of the intake manifold. There are still two things we need to do in order to get the wiring harness to move freely. You will need to remove this electrical connector and then give the wiring harness a good tug at this point in order to disconnect it from its mounting grommet on the intake manifold. We are now ready to start removing the coil packs. First, disconnect the connector from the coil pack and then remove the 10mm bolt that fastens it to the engine. I had to use an open-end wrench as this bolt is tucked in under the intake manifold. Once the bolt is removed, carefully pull the coil pack out. I'm now ready to remove my first spark plug. To prevent the spark plug socket from falling in the hole, I like to tape it to my extension using duct tape. Some of the spark plugs were extremely tight when trying to crack them loose, so be prepared. The spark plugs I purchased require no gapping and can be installed as is. I torqued my spark plugs to 23 foot-pounds. Reinstall the coil pack and tighten the 10mm bolt that fastens it to the engine. Do not plug in the electrical connector to the coil pack just yet. Wait until all three plugs have been changed on the driver's side. The reason for waiting is to maintain the slack in the wiring harness as you replace the remaining two spark plugs on this side. One down, only two more to go on this side. I'm going to continue replacing the other two spark plugs using the same method as I changed the first one. Here's a time-lapse video of me changing the remaining two spark plugs on the driver's side. We are now ready to reinstall the electrical connectors to the coil packs and sensor at the front of the engine. Reinstall the gray wiring harness in its mounting location on the intake manifold. Next, reinstall and tighten the bolts to the brackets that support the gray wiring harness. And lastly, reinstall a vacuum hose to the intake manifold. One side's all done. See, that wasn't so bad. Now let me show you how we're going to do the passenger side. In order to gain access to the coil packs, we will need to remove the intake plumbing from the intake manifold to the airbox. Start out by loosening these two hose clamps. Next, remove the decorative plastic cover over the airbox that is held in by using 4 plastic rivets. You can remove them by pushing down on the center of the rivet or by using a flathead screwdriver and prying the center disc up. Disconnect the electrical connector to the mass airflow sensor and remove the airbox. We are now ready to remove the intake plumbing. You can do this by disconnecting this air hose by pinching the clamp and sliding it out of the way, and removing this bottom hose. I had to use a flathead screwdriver in order to press on the plastic release button that would allow for this bottom hose to be removed. Removing these bolts that hold the gray wiring harness in place allow you to slide the wiring harness out of the way in order to gain easier access to the coil packs. Now that the intake pipe is out of the way, we can start the same process that we did on the driver's side. For stubborn electrical connectors, I carefully use a flathead screwdriver to pry it off the coil pack. Next, use a 10mm socket to remove the 10mm bolt that fastens the coil pack to the engine. Carefully lift up on the coil pack to remove it. Remove the old spark plug. Install the new spark plug and torque to 23 foot-pounds. Reinstall the coil pack and tighten the 10mm bolt that fastens it to the engine. Now start the process all over again for the remaining 2 spark plugs. Repeat the steps one more time for the last cylinder. Tighten the bolts that hold the gray wiring harness in its mounting location and reconnect the electrical connectors to the coil packs. All that's left to do is reinstall the intake pipe, airbox, and engine cover. If you did the work yourself, bask in the satisfaction that you just saved yourself between $350 and $400. As you can see, changing the spark plugs in a 4th Gen GS is pretty easy, and this service can be performed in under an hour. If you have any questions on how to change the spark plugs in your 4th Gen GS, leave them in the comment section and I'll do my best to answer them. If you want me to continue making Lexus DIY videos, make sure you hit that like button. So long.